Welcome back to the MizzouToday Show. I'm your host, Kenny Van Doren, joined as always by Kyle McAreavy. Oh man, Kyle, you're going to hate me on this one. Did I say it right, McAreavy?
McAreavy.
Okay, yeah, it was still a work in progress. So I thought I was doing well there for a little bit. But yeah, besides my mispronunciation skills, we're going to jump right into it. If you haven't seen already, recording here on Wednesday, news came out from Pete Thamel report from ESPN that Sam Horn will miss the remainder of the season. He had successful surgery this morning. Kyle, what can you kind of tell us about that and maybe just a quarterback job kind of moving forward, given there's only one true backup that has a scholarship?
Yeah, so with Horn's injury, that was, like you said, reported by Pete Thamel first. I reached out to a source within the program. They said that did not come from the team. They have been deferring to Horn's agent and camp, just, hit that side of it to kind of deal with injury updates and injury news and stuff. I reached out to Horn's agent, haven't gotten anything back yet, but I know it's been confirmed by I think it was Eli Hoff with the Post-Dispatch from a source of his own. So I trust the reporting. I, was kind of expecting that it would be a pretty long-term injury, even when Coach Drinkwitz had talked about it before. He was talking about, an extensive amount of time missed. And I had kind of been operating on the idea that if it was more than 6 to 8 weeks, if he wasn't there until the last couple of weeks of the season, he just wouldn't play again. I don't think, the risk evaluation of it, I don't really see a benefit to him coming and being a backup QB and risking his future in baseball when he's already got that contract. So, it kind of always felt to me like a situation where he probably wasn't coming back anyways. And like you talk about, now that just means it's Bo Prabula first and Matt Zollers is the backup, the true freshman. And then, a few walk-ons, probably Tommy Locke at this point is the third guy. So, that's the issue when you go into a season only carrying 3 scholarship quarterbacks and one of them is a true freshman who you were probably hoping to redshirt. Now, he's the actual backup and is going to probably have to take some serious reps at some point.
There's a fractured tibia for Horn, and with Zollers, he might be playing in this next game that we're talking about right now and previewing week 3 now against ULL. Mizzou coming off a win in the border war against Kansas. What did Drinkwitz talk about just about this Louisiana team? Walker Howard, 5-star quarterback, started at LSU, went to Ole Miss, and is now going to be out for the season after a week 1 injury, and they lost that game to Rice. What can you just tell us about ULL from what Drinkwitz talked about?
So with Walker Howard out, I know redshirt freshman Danny Beal kind of took over in that game against Rice. There's also redshirt sophomore Lunch Winfield, which is one of the more fun names you'll hear. He played in, I think, a game 2 seasons ago, missed all of last season due to injury, and as far as I know, hasn't had any stats this year. I think he might have played a snap. So it could be either of those two. I would expect it's probably Beal, just because he was the one who took over last week. But more importantly is the 2 running backs over there, Zylan Perry and Bill Davis. They're a serious 1-2 combo, kind of evenly split through the first 2 games, almost both eclipsed 100 yards last week against McNeese State. I think Bill Davis had like 110 or 120, somewhere in there for his career high. It really is going to be both of them. It'll be a challenge for Mizzou's run defense going in, having those 2 separate options. And Drinkwitz kind of said they're both built a little bit like Ahmad Hardy, so they might be, kind of tough to take down. And, the Tigers know the Sun Belt creates pretty good running backs.
Exactly. And so in this game too, if you're trying to build a lead against a ULL team that's been banged up and, struggled at times already to start the year, and talk about maybe, Matt Zollers gets in this game late. I want to talk about maybe some keys to the game, or just 3 things that, we should be worth watching and things that you might be watching. And you'll get to that a little bit later in the week pregame. But one thing we just probably should start with is maybe seeing more wide receivers involved. I mean, they're like a lot of receivers. I think 7 pass catchers recorded a catch in week 1, or at least 7 recorded more than 1 catch. With this game, if it gets a blowout at times, or maybe some other wide receivers get involved. I mean, who are you just kind of looking for in the pass catcher spot that could really have a big game against this ULL defense?
So I'll say through the first 2 weeks for Mizzou, it's been kind of an interesting change week to week. Week one, obviously, you got the opportunity to get everybody involved. It's Central Arkansas. You can kind of throw it all over the field as much as you want to. Week two, it was the Kevin Coleman show. That's not a bad thing, but Marquise Johnson, Joshua Manning didn't really get involved. Most guys had one catch, some of them one very important catch, but it was kind of just Kevin Coleman and Brett Norfleet, and those were your main pass catchers. Everyone else limited opportunities. I think this week is another kind of breakout opportunity week for maybe a guy like Joshua Manning. He's probably going to be, bigger and a bit faster than whoever's on him regularly. Got a bit of a Marquise Johnson breakout in week one. Maybe week three is where you get the Josh Manning breakout.
I don't know if Drinkwitz mentioned this, and you can answer this for us. The offensive line, right guard Tristan Wilson came in, took over for Curtis Piegler late into that Kansas game. What are you kind of looking for on that offensive line? And did Drinkwitz answer any questions on what that kind of looks like moving forward?
He answered it today on the SEC coaches teleconference, which was, not during our regular press conference yesterday. It was apparently just Piegler was cramping a bit in the fourth quarter. So Tristan Wilson came in. As we've talked about the past couple of weeks, Tristan's probably the realistic backup at all three of the interior line spots. So he came in, and I think it was either nine snaps or 6 snaps. It was less than 10 that he took at that right guard spot near the end of the game. I expect Piegler to be back out there. It seems like the team's pretty committed to making this grouping of the offensive line work. And Drinkwitz was pretty happy with the improvement, it seemed like, not necessarily the performance itself, but the step forward from week one to week two, especially in pass protection, was significantly better. He did call out the run blocking, opening up running lanes as still an issue, especially on a late 3rd and 1 where they weren't able to really get a push. So I think the next focus is kind of fixing that run blocking, trying to open lanes better, because we've seen now what Ahmad Hardy and Jamal Roberts can do when they're not getting a lot of help from the offensive line. If they start getting some help from the offensive line, that's a scary combo. I think I've mentioned a couple of times throughout the past few days, the Tigers put up 250 or whatever it was rushing yards. Like 160 or 170 of those were credited as after contact. So that's Ahmad Hardy and Jamal Roberts making the most out of not getting that much help. If you start giving those guys, across 35 carries in a game or whatever, if you start giving them 100 yards before contact combined, you're looking at some scary possibilities.
Give the flowers to where they're due as well with left guard Dominic Giudice. And I've said Giudice. I was thinking about it on my drive this morning, just kind of driving around. I was thinking it's Giudice. I mean, that's the Italian way to say it, but I know he's told you guys it's Giudice, correct?
It's a tough one, and it's similar to my name where it seems like he doesn't really care that much if people are slightly off on it. I thought it was Giudice or Giudice. The football info director introduced him this week when he talked to the media as Judice. So, I'm pretty sure Dominic told us it was Giudice in fall camp, but I'll have to go back and listen to that interview specifically to try to remember. There's a few different ways, and he said before that it's kind of fine, however, but I want to make sure we're pronouncing it correctly.
I think with that as well, we're talking about those flowers. Picked up 2 awards just in the past couple of days, and this is where we kind of want to pivot off of that. And I heard Drinkwitz kind of call it rat poison. All the success that they've added, awards for Bo Perbula. Kirby Moore picked up one as well. Brett Norfleet, like you were talking about, the Brett Norfleet show at tight end, getting ranked again, being number 25 in the AP poll, which we still haven't mentioned, which is important, by the way, too. But of that, what can you kind of tell us about Drinkwitz kind of calling that rat poison, and just kind of putting the blinders on and kind of going back into the nameless, faceless opponent that Mizzou has been talking about for years?
Yeah, it was interesting, with all of that, the weekly awards coming out, and a couple of them had already been announced by the time we had our press conference yesterday. And then the Kirby Moore news came out today that he was SEC Coordinator of the Week. And with all the good stuff that had been said about Mizzou since the border war win, Drinkwitz really wanted to focus in on areas of improvement that are left. He wanted to focus in on, I think even one of his quotes was something like, these guys have gotten enough praise, and it's time to focus on where we need to get better, or something like that. And yeah, he used the term rat poison. It was just, he's always liked to talk about, keeping out the outside noise, not paying attention to any of that, because it doesn't help you if you're looking around for that type of stuff. And, we asked repeatedly during fall camp and everything, when Caden Green was getting, preseason all SEC or preseason all American type stuff. And every player kind of said the same thing of like, yeah, we don't really pay attention, as it's nice, but doesn't really make a difference. And I think that's pretty much the same way the team's looking at it now.
I wanted to get to our ad read, but I'm going to just build off of that, talking about those improvements as well, just for our last thing to watch out for Mizzou against ULL. And that's the secondary. This game was sealed by an interception from Dalen Carnell, who even said it post-game, don't really rag on the secondary too much, because they performed well in some aspects of the game. But the coverage grades from PFF just weren't that outstanding. And I think that was one of the things that came out, especially when you were doing your grades for the different positions on the defense and position groups. What did Drinkwitz say about that? And what can you kind of tell us from some of those grades that maybe something Mizzou needs to improve on, especially in a week 3 game that's against a group of 6 opponent?
Yeah, so I think the thing that stood out during the game last week was Mizzou was playing a lot of soft zone coverage, which is kind of designed to let up short passes, right? You're not in a soft zone. You're generally not breaking up a lot of passes. It's you let the guy catch it, you make your tackle quickly, so there's no yards after the catch. And if that's the game plan, Mizzou did fine. I mean, there weren't a lot of broken tackles from the secondary. There weren't a lot of, extra yard opportunities, which is good. But there was a lot of completions, and it kind of led into Kansas being able to sustain longer drives, which right after the game, Drinkwitz came in and said, there were a couple of blown plays that didn't end up being that bad in man coverage because of, say, like an overthrow where a Kansas receiver had his defender beat pretty bad, which then kind of, he didn't use the word scared. I've used the word scared the Tigers into playing that soft zone. So you don't want to get beat deep. That's the idea of that. But he doesn't want to do that moving forward, and said specifically, we need to focus on a different scheme. We need to not, let that happen over and over again in that same way. So I think there's going to be some schematic differences looking at this week, because even though there were a couple of plays where, man coverage got burnt or got hurt a bit, Drinkwitz had been very complimentary about the man-to-man coverage from last week, and said, the zone schemes were when the communication issues really played into some issues, and, just a couple of things like that. Eye issues, communication issues. So I expect the scheme to look a bit different moving forward, and we'll see, how effective those changes are, especially once, 2 weeks from now when we get into South Carolina.
Before we get into maybe some of those game predictions for ULL, got a quick ad read from our sponsors over at Rhoback Active, where there's only one way to describe Rhoback: best feel, or best fit, best feel. For those who aren't familiar with Rhoback, they're completely changing the game with their incredibly comfortable activewear. We didn't do this on purpose, but Kyle and I are both wearing the Hezzy hoodie today. I will point out that Kyle did not wear his Hezzy hoodie to the game on Saturday for the Border War. Rhoback has released so many items within their new licensed game day collection, and it's our favorite, with novel polo designs and clean hoodie and Q-zip designs for some of your favorite schools. It's definitely worth checking out. Nobody else on the market is pairing these level of custom designs with this quality of activewear. Rhoback's everyday shorts or their Delta Performance pants are the perfect pairing as well. They are both super comfortable, having a less elastic waistband, and great fabric that is made to have the appearance of a nice short look, but the comfort for a day on the move. Rhoback has also been proudly leading the NIL charge, having signed partnerships with multiple college football stars, past and present, and are becoming the go-to brand for college athletes. Use code MIZ20 on rhoback.com for a generous 20% off, all for new customers through the end of this week. That's spelled RHOBACK.com. That's 20% off all performance polos, shorts, and more with code MIZ20. Kyle actually was out at a bar after the game just with some buddies that went to Mizzou, and actually handed out the MIZ20 code to a Jayhawks fan who I was there with that I knew, and he wrote it down. So I think advertising works. That's all I can say. And even when I had that up on the screen last week, I told you I went and I was going to post it and share the code again, and found out that all the things were sold out right when I was going to share it. So I had to share it and say, hey, this stuff's sold out. It's coming back soon, as you guys just saw if you're watching with us on the YouTube. Kyle, team looks a little bit different than it did coming into the year, but I mean, with Beau Pribula at quarterback, I don't think expectations are mainly really changing for week 3. And can you get into those, just what you're looking for, and then your final score prediction?
Yeah, I think in general, we're back into a kind of a cupcake matchup. Louisiana is a traditionally good, group of 5, group of 6 team. Not incredible last year. And I think, as much as they have 2 powerful running backs who might give Mizzou a little bit of trouble, just the way that the Mizzou run defense performed last week, even if you take out the 25 yards that Kansas lost on the fumble that turned into a safety, Mizzou held them to, even without that, like 28 total yards. I think it was 3 total yards net officially. Like, if you can do that to a Power 4 team, you should be able to do that or something similar to a group of 6 team. I'm not saying they need to have only 3 yards allowed or do better, but another strong game against 2 good running backs would be pretty nice to see. And then, I just don't think this is the game where we can evaluate the differences in the coverage defensively. Louisiana's just not, or at least through the first 2 weeks, hasn't been a strong passing team. I don't remember exactly, so I'm not going to give specific numbers, but I'm pretty sure they haven't hit 100 passing yards in either game. And if they're not hitting 100 passing yards, or let's say 150 in case I'm forgetting, against McNeese State, I just don't think that's an actual evaluation opportunity to look at what the Tigers are able to do, or really anything that we'll be able to take away from that moving forward. Do want to see some more improvement from the offensive line for sure. Drinkwitz called out Louisiana's defensive line as being pretty strong. But again, it's another cupcake opportunity. This should be a game that the Mizzou offensive line really steps up and is able to kind of dominate a bit. We did not see that in week 1. I'd like to see that now. I think that would be a good sign moving forward. And I looked back and I predicted this game as 31-7 going into the year. I have a little more confidence in the Mizzou offense now than I did at that point after watching Beau Pribula operate it for 2 weeks. So I'll say, let's give him 42 points again. I'll say 42-7.
I think that's a fair prediction. And based on like everything you've said too, talking about those running backs, talking about, a new look at quarterback, not having Walker Howard back there, and a lot of uncertainty over these past 2 games. It's like we're talking too much about it. Like we're expecting ULL to maybe keep this close, because I think in all honesty, if something goes wrong with Mizzou, maybe it happens. But in reality, I think this is a game that Mizzou should win. They paid the Ragin Cajuns to come up for this game. And I think we're talking too much about it. I think I'm digging my hole even deeper and trying to yell up at you right now, Kyle. But I will say I'm going to stick with my score prediction of 34-10. I think one of those touchdowns, or the only touchdown for the Ragin Cajuns, does come from one of those running backs that you were talking about. And whichever one, closer to the end zone, just they sneak in for a score and then another field goal would make the most sense. And I think a 24-point win is perfectly fine against a Sun Belt team, especially just as you're still preparing. You're looking ahead too with your first SEC game the next weekend against South Carolina. And, Mizzou's always talking about not trying to look too far ahead, but I think it's still just in the back of their minds that, SEC plays right around the corner. Then you have homecoming against UMass. So, it's just something that is going to be a big game against South Carolina at night, 6 or 6:30. So I'm going to stick with 34-10. And I think that offers Robbie Meyer 2 opportunities to kick a field goal too. This could be a good opportunity for him. Any other just takeaways?
I wanted to hit on Robbie Meyer for a second too. Almost forgot, but I do think this is a great opportunity. Drinkwitz mentioned, after the game, he had, I don't remember what the exact yardage limit was, but there was kind of a yard marker where beyond that, they just weren't going to try a field goal, even though they were confident in Meyer's ability to hit from the distance, or to at least, put it far enough. They weren't necessarily confident in the accuracy and didn't want to blow his confidence, in his first real opportunity. So they let him kick a 25, let him kick a 20. He saw both of those go through. And I think now he's had 8 extra points across the 2 weeks. So that's 10 kicks that he's seen go through the uprights. I think it's probably time to let him try from a little bit farther out and maybe keep kind of extending the range a little bit. The only reason I think this might not be the perfect opportunity for that is that means the offense stalls out in the 25 to 35 range. And that's not necessarily something you want to see against this level of competition. But if it does a couple of times, this will be a good opportunity for Meyer to get out there and, in somewhat of a low stress situation, at least comparatively to last week or next week, get, another opportunity to see a couple of kicks go between the uprights and maybe from a little farther.
I looked up while you were talking to 52 yards. So that's the kind of where they're looking at, is don't really want to go any further than that. And Blake Craig, he was off to a great start. I think we talked about it before with how good he looked before that season-ending ACL injury in week 1. And I think, he had a lot of leg behind him, a lot more accuracy and confidence. Probably what they're trying to get out of Robert Meyer too, as he takes over possibly for Blake Craig in maybe 2 years. Don't really know what the future will hold for either of them. That's going to do it for our preview, though, of ULL. This game will kick off at 3 p.m. Saturday, September 13th at Memorial Stadium. Game is only on streaming, though, SEC Network Plus and ESPN Plus. You have to have a subscription for both, or you can listen to the game, as always, on the Tiger Radio Network. That's Kyle man, I'm gonna practice this, Kyle. I'm gonna say it to myself every morning. And I probably, people that listen to us, if you're new here, I'm sorry, we're new here too. I mean, this is our 5th show. So it's Kyle. I'm Kenny. You can find our work at Mizzou Today on 3 and Rivals, and we will see you next time.